So thanks everyone for coming today. Before we kick off proceedings, I'll hand over to our lovely MC Emily. I just want to say a little bit about the library that you're in. So my name's Ellen, I'm the convener of ALIAVic. I'm also the collections librarian volunteer coordinator here. So if you've got any questions about the PMI, I'm the one to ask, as well as there's a few of our volunteers around too. Basically, we're the second oldest public library in Victoria. We've been around since 1854, so we're 171 this year. And we specialise in Victorian history. So everything we collect is either Victorian history or Australian history as it relates to Victoria. I'm also very happy to do a tour of the library once the whole shebang is finished. So hang around if you want to do that once we've done the food and everything else, and we've done our film presentations. Hang around in the main library and I can answer all your questions because I've been here 9 years and know this place backwards and underwater. I will now hand over to Emily, who will kick proceedings off for today.
Great, thank you, Ellen. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ALIA Victoria's 6th annual October panel. This one's called Librarians Without Librarians, ? My name is Emily Szymborski. I'm the treasurer here for ALIA Victoria, and I'll be your host for this afternoon. Before we begin, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live. We pay our respects to elders, past and present. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We also acknowledge First Nations people's rich history of knowledge keeping and knowledge management that is an inspiration to us all. So today we're exploring a fantastic theme, how librarianship extends beyond the traditional library setting. And not all librarians work in libraries. Our panelists today demonstrate how library skills are being used in diverse and impactful ways across different industries. So thank you for coming. We're very fortunate to be joined by 3 wonderful speakers, each bringing their own unique perspective. Unfortunately, Giselle Helly from James Bennett wasn't able to join us, but we're very pleased to welcome Zoe in her place. So Zoe is the collection strategy specialist at James Bennett, who has been working in the junior collections team for 6 months. She came to her position at James Bennett after many years of working as a bookseller and is currently completing a Master's of Information Studies. Next up, we have Julianne Miller, Senior Database Specialist at OCLC, with a strong focus on data management and accessibility across glamour spaces. And lastly, we have Darren Ryan, Manager Supply and Risk at CAVAL, who brings over 3 decades of experience across academic, public, and special libraries. And I have a note here saying that you've been Santa Claus.
Yeah, I'm a secret.
Please join me in welcoming our panelists. So each of our panelists will present for about 5 to 10 minutes to share their story and give an insight into what it means to be a librarian outside of a library. And then after all 3 have spoken, we will open the floors to questions. First up, we have Zoe.
Introduction. So yes, my name is Zoe. I work at James Bennett and I'm in the junior team. And my apologies if anyone was particularly excited to hear from Giselle. I can be a worthy substitute. So yes, I spent 5 years as a bookseller while I was doing my undergraduate in psychology and international relations. And deciding that I wanted to pursue neither of those paths, I had a bit of a think about what my future held. And I think libraries felt like a really good meeting point between my interest in social justice and public policy, as well as working with books. So I began my Master of Information Studies this year, and I also took on a role at James Bennett. So James Bennett has been operating for 60 years now and works with public libraries, academic libraries, and early learning centres. And we see ourselves as a library solutions partner. So that means we work in a number of different areas. So firstly, you have the collection strategy and development, which is the team that I work in. And this is where libraries outsource title selection to us. I'm sure a number of you in the room are already familiar with James Bennett. And we also manage budgets as well. So where whole collections have been outsourced to us, We provide reporting, budget tracking, and making sure that not only a budget's spent, but there's a steady flow of materials throughout the year. We also have our own in-house IT team who work on integrations and workflow efficiencies. In my eyes, they work magic. So they do our EDI workflows and work with libraries to make sure we're collaborating effectively and maintain our website, which has a database of titles that libraries can place their own orders. Now, our customised library services, that's our shelf-ready services, so our cataloguing, labelling and covering. And we also are always looking for new products and services to encourage community engagement and sustainability as well. So, the collections strategy team. We are currently a team of 12 and we buy print materials in all of the areas listed here, and we each specialise in a particular area. So in a nutshell, our job is essentially to buy and promote titles to libraries. So that includes profile-based selection, which is where we work with libraries to tailor and develop their profiles for particular collections, which gives us instructions about what kind of materials they want to see, and then we manage it from there. They can also set up standing orders, which we maintain, and order, so that's where they can specify particular authors, series and quantities. It's a really good opportunity for libraries to notify us of authors that might be specific to their area, or authors where they want quantities that exceed what we would normally be buying as well. And they can set up specific awards profiles for annual awards as well, so that that's sort of automated and sent to them at the time of announcement. And we do also do collection gap ordering, so that's where we start to go back into backlist as well. For some libraries, we also create curated selection lists, so that's where they want to make the final choices themselves about what they're ordering, but we're still creating lists for them based on their sort of requirements. And we also maintain the titles on our website as well. So we create monthly new release kits to draw librarians who place their own orders, draw their attention to new titles that we think they're going to want to know about, as well as trending title carousels. We also do one-off buying projects, so where a library might receive a grant and they want to allocate that to a specific collection. And again, that's an opportunity for us to go into backlist and really strengthen a collection as well. And we also, a personal favourite of mine is working on opening day collections. So that's where we get to build an entire collection from scratch and really go back and find those classic titles that patrons are going to be expecting to see on the shelves. And it's always a good feeling when they open up and we hear that people are really excited to come in and find things on the shelf. And when we're doing all of this, I guess our overarching aim is to improve library circulation stats, but also to make sure that they feel like they have collections that are relevant and that they're having those popular titles that people are coming in and asking for. And so then a little bit more about my sort of day-to-day specifically. I've outlined a sort of hypothetical day in my life. So I might start by identifying new release titles. So what we do here is essentially we get data feeds from publishers and I have to go in and tidy up that data. So make sure that it's accurate, but also that it's meaningful when I then go to match that title for a library, or when they search that on our websites, making sure that age ranges and things like that are accurate. We might then have a meeting with a publisher rep, so we regularly meet with most of the major publishers. This is where we get to see samples of materials, and they'll also give us a little bit of information about what titles they're going to be really heavily promoting, so it just helps us kind of anticipate demand as well. In the afternoon, I might spend a bit of time working on one of those special buys. So like I said, going back, looking at those classic series as well as the newer stuff as well. And then we might have a client meeting. So we have fairly regular profile review meetings with libraries. It's a really good opportunity for them to give us feedback about the materials that they're receiving, but also for us to make sure that their profile is really matching what they want to see and also matching what is being published. So there are sometimes areas where we might have to, unfortunately, say that, you've allocated budget here, but unfortunately publishers really just aren't publishing much material in this space, or the other way around. There's so much great material in junior graphic novels, it's super popular. Maybe you want to add a little bit more money in there. So we are having those conversations with libraries as well. And then I might actually get to sit down and look at forthcoming titles. So we try to work 3 to 4 months in advance, and I'm matching for things like standing orders, but then also looking at, does this match a library's profile, and do they have the budget to allow me to buy this title? So then talking a little bit about my degree. So I am still pursuing my librarian qualifications at the moment, but I have noticed that at the moment that influence is going both ways. So I'm finding my experience is really informing some of the work that I do in my assignments, and I'm familiar with a lot of things that are coming up, particularly in collections units, but then also the other way around. And I think particularly just having that broader knowledge about the industry, the issues facing the industry, I think that puts me in a really good position to understand where librarians are coming from when we're working with them and what their sort of overarching objectives are. And it is something that is on my mind when I'm making decisions about purchasing titles as well. And then looking forward, so the best thing for me about this role and what really attracted me was the experience working with so many different librarians in different libraries all across Australia and New Zealand. So it's been really fascinating to hear the different ways that they approach their collections, the different demographics that they're serving, and how that informs their decision making. And I also have the opportunity in the future to travel out to a lot of different libraries as well and meet the staff there and see the different ways that they do things. And also, as I sort of continue my studies, if I do find other areas of interest like data, IT, or cataloguing, because I work in an organisation that does all of those different things, there's an opportunity for me to sort of learn and specialise in other areas as well. And so yeah, just to round out, I think a lot of what draws us into libraries is the amazing work that they do in their communities, and it's really special to me to be able to see that in so many different libraries and feel like a part of that sort of larger ecosystem as well. Thank you.
I would love to see what's on your Goodreads shelf, just based off of your background. I feel like it'd be really interesting.
I can get it up on the screen.
We'll do a show and tell later. Mine has lots of children's books on it, not for me. All right, next up we have Julianne Miller, the Senior Database Specialist at OCLC.
Hi everyone, my name is Julianne Miller. I am a Senior Metadata Specialist, or Database Specialist at OCLC, working here in Melbourne in our Australian office. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of land and country on which every OCLC office stands, and that is international, including the US and Canada. So I don't have a slideshow, so you're just going to have to listen to me talk. I'm so sorry. So what do? I had to think about this very carefully because sometimes I honestly don't know myself. So basically, in a nutshell, I work with libraries and librarians all over the world in all different kinds of situations. So I work with libraries in every country and region outside of the United States, and that is every size, type, and variety. I work with academic libraries who have hundreds and hundreds of staff, down to very small, incredibly important cultural libraries who have one librarian, and if they are super lucky, one volunteer. So I work with all kinds. I work with law libraries, special libraries, councils, governments, health, and schools and arts. So I work with a huge number of different people in libraries all over the world. I also work with different types of infrastructures. So I work with, especially one of my favorites, Te Puna in New Zealand, Aotearoa. I absolutely love all of my Te Puna libraries. I work with them on maintaining their national union catalogues and infrastructures. I work with different consortia of libraries, so and also national infrastructures such as JISC in the UK, and a few different big consortia in Europe and around the world. So my team is international, and we work with all levels. Most importantly though, I work with library metadata. I am a massive cataloguing nerd. So I'm just going to put that up there. I might say things that don't make sense if you don't do cataloguing metadata, but that's, I apologize in advance. I super duper love it. So I work with libraries basically to load their data into WorldCat. And that can be for libraries who either just want their holdings represented in WorldCat, up to people who want to use our LMS WorldShare system. So there's a huge variety in my work. And I forgot to put this in my bio, but I also am a sessional marker at CSU. Sessional marker in this context is just a very fancy word for I mark papers. So I mark assessments for for students of the library school at Charles Sturt University, both undergraduate and masters, and I mostly mark metadata units, but I also sometimes do the foundational work. So that sort of plays into what I do. So what does that mean as a librarian to me? I am simultaneously looking at an individual library record in a system, which could be anything. It could be a standard book, textbook, serial, but at the same time I'm looking at their entire collection. And sometimes that is 10,000 records, sometimes that is millions. So I'm having to look at the context of a library's entire collection, whilst also just looking at single records. So a lot of what I do, I have to put on my librarian hat. I never actually take it off. It's very disruptive to the office. I have to translate individual library methods into WorldCat. So we have so many members. We have 5 billion metadata records in WorldCat. So how does one tiny little library with one librarian and maybe sometimes a volunteer and 10,000 records, how does that actually translate into a gigantic database? So that's what I do. I look at all the rules. I look at none of the rules. I look at all the languages, but also none of the languages. And I have to make that work. And to make that work, I have to understand what it means to be a librarian. So I have to remember, back when I used to work in actual libraries, what it means to sit down in a collection development meeting and say, how do we make this insane thing work for us? Because libraries are always having to do that. We're always having to adapt and evolve and think of, we have this bizarre little collection of, I can't even think right now, photographs. How do we make that accessible to our users? Because it's not straightforward. It never has been, because we're libraries. So I have to be aware of how libraries come to decide workflows and methodologies, because that informs how I'm going to work with them. I also need to remember what it's like to be outside of a vendor, because OCLC is a vendor. I need to remember what it's like to actually work in the library industry. So I have to remember what is the current climate. I have to remember what is happening. So when I first got my diploma back in 2008, it was RDA. RDA was the big thing that was going to come and change everything. It was going to replace AACR2. It's still the big thing that's coming to replace AACR2. Yeah, I know, it's coming. It's always coming. The cogs, they move so slowly. But now, it's bib frame. There's all kinds of really exciting schema and new and wonderful classification schemas that people are using. There are vocabularies that we didn't have, like homosaurus didn't exist back in, well, it maybe did exist back in 2008. I apologize to anyone who does know that. But it just wasn't as well known, and now it is. So now, we have to be aware of that. And when I do marking work for CSU, I use my knowledge and my expertise to provide feedback to library students, because they may or may not be working in the industry. And so sometimes my feedback informs them how they're going to move forward and apply the knowledge that they have gotten, unfortunately, usually through assessment. So I do apologize for that, the stress of assessments. But I do take that very seriously. So how did I end up here? I also had to think about this. I honestly don't know. I got my diploma in 2008. And I just basically went into cataloguing. I did a whole bunch of cataloguing contracts. I worked at the National Library for a little bit. I finished an undergrad, volunteered in museums, volunteered in galleries, and then joined OCLC. I got my master's, I think I completed it in 2023. Thank you, Rose. I'm very bad at dates. So that does sound kind of like standard library work, but I have never done anything that wasn't a little bit odd. So I've always taken jobs and volunteer positions and placements that were a little bit strange. My very first placement in 2007 when I was doing my diploma was with the New South Wales Police Forensics Department, where I organised their forensic handwriting, what's it called, research collection. How do they, I almost got squashed by the Panadol poisonings case notes when I was trying to reorganise them. I took every single secondment at the National Library because it sounded interesting, because I wanted every single opportunity, and there were so many. And I went from National Library of Australia to working in a tiny Office of Environment and Heritage library with one librarian. And I was not the volunteer, but they had volunteers. And every day I came to work, I was observed by a stuffed wombat up on top of one of the racks. And that was always, I have always done stuff that is interesting to me. So I very much encourage everyone to do that. When I came to OCLC, I was hired as a resource sharing support person. So I came to them with a really heavy cataloguing background, but I wasn't hired to do that. And I just, one day, our previous metadata specialist was like, what do you think of this? And it was just a piece of custom coding that had been written for a new system. And I at the time, very stupidly said, oh yeah, that looks really interesting. I can see what that's doing. And then basically I just got snaffled, and my team leader got very annoyed because I got just yoinked out of support and put into metadata. So I don't know how I came to do what I do. It's a very weird niche job. I am the only person who does it outside of Europe and America for OCLC. But I love what I do. I love working with libraries. I talk to libraries all day, every day. Thank you. That's all I do. I talk to them, I work out what they're doing and what they need, and I do my best to apply that. And I'm very passionate about it. So that's how I operate as a librarian without a library. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love catalogers. I think they're fascinating. I could never do what they do. So thank you for all your work. And last up, we have Darren Ryan, Manager of Supply and Risk at CAVAL and part-time Santa.
Thank you. So as I said, as introduced before, I'm not the oldest person in the room, but I have worked in library since 1991, so you can do the math. And one of the things that I got told when I worked in recruitment at a company called the One Umbrella, that unfortunately no longer exists, was, are you working in the dark side now? And that's how I come up with this presentation title. So welcome to the dark side. So, and I'm not going to mention where I come from, you already know where I come from. So this is a bit of a different presentation because I probably slightly misread what I was supposed to do. So let's go for it. Let's leave it at that, and if I get to the end, then we should just clap and not just walk away. So, okay. So let me start. So there is a symbiotic relationship between suppliers and libraries. We cannot survive without each other. It doesn't matter which organisation you work in, or your organisation and you personally are reliant on suppliers. So you think about if you work in, doesn't matter which organisation, each day probably over 100 suppliers are supporting your library. If you think about the HVAC system, whoever can supply and support the computer system, James Bennett, OCLC, just put me in names, they're all supporting you. And it is a bit of a chicken and egg, which came first, the library or the supplier. So if you've ever been fortunate enough to go to conferences, and I think of the heady days in Vala when I used to be on the committee, we used to have over 80 suppliers exhibiting at some of those industry events. In ALA, so the American version, in 2024 there was over 1,900 exhibitors. So, and that's not all of them. So you can just think and it's also the suppliers that supply us as well. So some of us, as we've just discussed, chosen to work in this industry, and some just took a bit of a change some lanes and we ended up in here. So I've struggled to condense, but also I rewrote this presentation a few times, what I've learned from working in libraries industry and in supply land, but here's a few. So, I love these. Okay, so how did I get here? So first of all, I failed VCE. But before that, I grew up in Ballarat. So about the age of 15, there was something called the State Electricity Commission. Yes, I know it's back, but it's not the real thing. But at that time, you could apply for apprenticeships at 15. So I was applying for apprenticeships at 15. I was a tech boy, so mechanics, all that kind of stuff. I also applied for the Army. I'd actually finished my VC, failed, but I actually applied for the Army and the police force. Fortunately, I didn't actually get into any, for them at least anyway. As I said, I failed VCE. I actually, I'm the same, I was academically back then, I wasn't the best student, but having failed it, I thought, okay, I didn't get the marks to become a teacher. And trust me, you do not want me as a primary school teacher. But what I did, I actually went up to New South Wales, middle of New South Wales, spent some time up there, went up to Mildura, actually picked and packed grapes, and then I came back to Ballarat where I was growing up. We're also Ballarat Uni, BCAE, so Ballarat College Advanced Education, had a librarianship school. One of my friends was doing the course and it only just started. He said, look, go and have a chat and see if you can get in. So I went and had a chat to the coordinator. The next day I started as a library student. So that's how easy it is to get into it. You don't need but I did tell I've got 2 adult children now, but when they were doing year 11, they knew that I failed. There was no stress on them. My daughter's now a teacher, unbelievable, and my son wants to be a police officer. He's nearly there as well, so good on him. So when I completed my degree, I applied for over 70 roles here in Australia and PNG as well. So, because I couldn't get a job. It was the early 90s. I ended up getting an interview at then the Western Institute, now Victoria University of Technology, and I got a role part-time for an academic year. So each day I drove 200 kilometres from Ballarat to Mount Darren and back to actually to get to where I was. So yeah, I've done thousands of kilometres. Every 10 weeks I would be servicing my car just because it was done 10,000 Ks. And I've held roles from library officer, and that was my first role, up to acting CEO and other things as well. And yes, I was Santa 1 year. I was a manager at Melbourne Regional Library, which is now Yarra Libraries, and Melbourne Library Service. And they needed males, but yeah, I was one of the skinniest Santas that year. And it was only 1 year, because those kids are, they just are brutal. They're heckling. Okay, this is the book in the 70s, 80s, 90s. People are laughing because they've probably read it. They probably have it on their shelf. But there was only 2 things I learned. One was the reference interview, which was good because I became a reference librarian. And the other, that was about it. So these are CAVAL, so that's where I work, does have this on their shelves. I actually found it, and so I grabbed it because I tried to remember what were the points. But it is, it's 2 volumes because you need 2 volumes to learn reference work. But these are the 10 steps that you need to do when you're sitting at the desk. So remember these if you ever get an opportunity. Remember an interview as a personal matter. Learn as much as you can about the person. Try to appreciate the patron's point of view. Make the user feel at ease. It goes on. And And the other one is, the last one. Some people, the last one is, it's the best. Sometimes people don't want assistance. They just want to chat. And working in public libraries, it was true. People just didn't want to, come in, find something. They just wanted to say hello, grab the newspaper and be present. So I think that's probably the most important thing when you're doing a reference selection or reference interview, is just listening. Okay. Oh, and in regard to the Red Book, I was at Deakin, and I think I've probably done a few months. Student came up and said to me, I'm looking for this Red Book, can you help me find it? And me, flippantly being the 21-year-old I was, said, it's over the Red Book collection, in the reference area. They actually took off, and I had to stop them and get them to come back. People are gullible. Okay, how do you eat an elephant? Now, this is all about project management. These are some of the things that, in organisations and some of the libraries I've worked in, I've worked on various projects, like building projects. Nearly every of the library, when I was at Yarra, Melbourne, was either redeveloped or developed. City Library is one, East Melbourne's another. The first one was Fitzroy Library. Library management system projects. What else all we've done? Very, tenders, the whole range of different things. But these are some of the things that I use in my role here, at CAVAL, but also other organisations. But it's project management, I think, is important as change management as well. It is a key skill to develop both working in the industry and as being in supplier land. Most of us in our career will lead or participate in projects. It can be as small as the implementation of a Lego club, which I was involved in, to a system implementation. So one of the projects I was involved in was the initial tender process and implementation for the SWIFT, now I think it's called Libraries Victoria, the library management system that pretty much takes up half of the state. So both, I'm pretty sure, well, for me, both these skills are quite easy to master. How the impact, depending on the project, may have huge effects if you get it wrong. And look, I've been involved in many a project when things have gone wrong. A friend of mine asked me, or was studying project management as part of her master's course, and she was concerned, it was going to be too hard for her to understand. And I basically asked her, tell me how you make a cup of tea. And she went through, get a kettle, pour in the water in the kettle, etc. And I said, that's project management. Just breaking a task down into smaller tasks. And change management is about making a cup of tea for another person. You ask them what they would like. If you want, if you're a tea connoisseur, you'll ask them which, the 20 plus tea varieties you've got. Leaves or a bag, mug or a cup, strength of tea, milk and or sugar, etc. When the person drinks it, they'll hopefully enjoy it. But because you've engaged with them early and throughout the process, that is part of all about change management. It's not hard, just making a person a cup of tea. So what's this force majeure stuff? Contract management. Who's actually signed a contract before? Yeah. Okay. Has anyone actually read the T's and C's and some of this? Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? So for each library, or each year, libraries spend millions of dollars. So in the 2023 or 2024-25 financial year, Victorian Public Library's income expenditure, wait for it, was over $300 million. In ALIA's website, it says on 2021 it was over $2 billion just for libraries in Australia. So that's a lot of money. I'm not getting it. So, so depending on your current or future role, you may be signing up for millions of dollars, projects, building project, library management system over the life of the 3 or 5 years, how long you sign up. And it pays to understand what all those clauses mean, especially when things go wrong. And here's some examples I've actually experienced. It wasn't my fault, but I was there. For example, the supplier goes into administration. A good example, and we were just talking about this before, is Baker & Taylor. you know, in the US, how they've just gone. But I can tell you from my experience, if someone goes in administration, it has a huge effect on the organisation that you're at, you know, whether it's print management or serials, just to name a few. The product or service is not fit for purpose. I won't name names, but I started an organisation where I was overseeing this contract, and the organisation had signed up and to a $100,000 project over 5 years, or a service solution. It didn't work from day one. They were still paying $20,000 a year for that product. The false ceiling of a newly renovated but yet to be open library collapses. That was Fitzroy Library. Why? Because the engineer didn't have long enough screws in the project plans. Or you signed an agreement, this is like the best one, that states you can only allow users who reside in the council boundaries to use an e-resource, even though a high percentage live outside the boundaries. So as soon as you signed it, you were in breach of contract. So these are just the small things that you need to be aware of. And in Deakin, in an article, I actually do some research for these things. Despite our best intentions, most of us simply sign terms and conditions, rarely read the fine print, and fail to appreciate the consequences. They found in one study only 8% of the people read a bank account contract, 19% a car rental contract, and 25%, I'm not too sure, 25% a dry cleaning contract. I'm not too sure about that, but what's the worst could happen? Anyway, so having written and actually, you know, responded to a number of tenders, you know, having the customers and suppliers' perspective helps. Not all of us get the opportunity to have formal contract training or legal advice prior to reviewing and signing an agreement. However, if you can, seek it out. So yeah, it's a great thing to do. Unfortunately, I've worked with a number of solicitors over the years, so it does help. Okay, renting space in people's mind. Now this is AI's co-pilot's attempt for my dream. Okay, so we'll get into it in a minute. Okay, so a senior manager in shell-defined brand is renting space in people's minds. That is when you're thinking of a soft drink, or some zesty beverage, you know, you think of Coke, Pepsi, or you know, maybe the Carlsberg. So all organisations, including libraries and suppliers, need to continually to market and promote their solutions and services to their current and future customers. It doesn't matter how many times and or ways you promote your organisation. Some people won't remember, especially libraries. It's only when you have to have a need, such as I want to research my family history, that they recall that you have tools like Ancestry available at your local library. Which leads to my question, you know, what is one of the library's biggest competitors? Anyone? Close. Bunnings, people. It is Bunnings. And this is the reason why I think we should have libraries in Bunnings. You laugh now, but think about it. You know, when I've got so many hours in the day, what do I want to do? I'm going to build something or go grab my latest Preston and Child. My local library is Watsonia Library, and that's what I'm reading at the moment, book. And it will be going to Bunnings because, you know, Bunnings are great. So I think we should have more. So I think we should have more Bunnings because it is all about, we have 24 hours a day, depending on if you've got family, sporting events or whatever, commitments, you may only have a few hours, you know, left. So it is about people's discretionary time. And I must admit, I didn't get back into public libraries reading really until I actually started working in public libraries. Before that, there was no hope. And we had a local library where I was living. If aliens landed, what would they say? So I heard this quote in a VALA, I think it was a VALA presentation, it was about 10 years ago. And I wrote this quote down. It was on my window of my previous organisation and then my current one, and then some clever staff actually got me a cup, and it's actually on my cup at work. So organisations are very good at creating environments that create barriers for their customers to access the use and their services. If you want to spend money and you can't find someone, Maya is a great place. The second place is Anaconda. Trust me, they're all hiding. Think about the times you try to find someone in a store, like Anaconda and Maya, just want to get assistance or pay for something. The last time I was in Encounter, I came to the front desk and I said, I want to pay you money, because I'd spent 15 minutes trying to catch the eye of an assistant, 15-year-old boy, just averting their eyes. So an example of this from a library's perspective is, I was being trained at Port Phillip Library Service at the Albert Park Library to drive the desk. A person rang up and said, I'd like to book an event that was happening over at Emerald Hill. Because I was trained, I think it was in my second week, so I had no idea what was happening. So I said to my trainer, Lester, I said, Alistair, what do we do? And he goes, we've got a paper-based system, but this is 2014. Well, you just tell them to ring up Emerald Hill when they're open. So, okay, and I explained to the person, very embarrassed, because I thought this is not right. So, as the IT team leader, so I was second week in my role, I then gathered a posse of people because I thought this is a bit ridiculous. We're trying to encourage people to come to the library, but we're putting a barrier to entry. And by stealth, because I like a good project by stealth, we implemented the library's first electronic or online booking system. It was by stealth because council's IT were blocking us trying to do this. So it is sometimes, we need to try and remove as many barriers as possible to ensure people can actually come to our organisations. And it's the same with working in suppliers. You want to try and to get people to buy your solution and pay for it as quickly as possible. So that's one of the big things. Okay, some obligatory quotes. I love a quote. This one, it is about being yourself. So it doesn't matter whether you're working in libraries or in supplier land. If you can be yourself, doesn't matter where you are, I think it just strongly helps. And this one I like as well, because it is about, we are continually, an architect of our career. So we're chiseling and adding bits and taking bits out. Because, stuff that I learned back in 1991, I, upskill and downskill all the time. I think that's about it. Thank you very much for your time.
Darren, I'm going to assume you have a pretty rich and Lego collection.
Sorry, what?
I won't repeat that word, but also you have a pretty good Lego collection.
I've got 2 kids, you should see it. I've got a big shed. It's full of Legos.
All right, well, thank you to Zoe, Julianne, and Darren for those fascinating insights. We'll open the floor, open it up to the floor for questions from the audience. Is there anyone who had any questions?
I had a question for Julianne.
Hello.
Hello. What would you recommend for people who are interested in cataloguing outside of libraries? How would you recommend for getting into that workforce?
Well, I think it's cataloguing outside of libraries. There's only so many options, I suppose. You've got the vendor route, which is obviously what I do, and there are some other vendors who do cataloguing services. I guess there's also, museums is a kind of a cross skilling. They have object management systems where the principles are still the same, similarly with galleries and that sort of thing. And then you do have some private institutions that do an equivalency of cataloguing, but I guess it's just finding a solid base to start off with, and then you will find your little niche as you go. But it's, if you're really interested in cultural objects, then I would say museums are probably the place to start in terms of collection management. But yeah, it just kind of depends what sort of cataloguing you like doing. There's so many options. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
That's right.
Other questions?
Julianne, can I ask you a question?
Oh,
yes,
Emily,
please.
is that right?
Do you do any work, like in your job with around reparative description?
Oh, yes, I do.
Oh.
So I'm going to out her. One of my project managers is here today in the audience. She's currently shaking her head. Hi, Rose. So Rose and I did a little bit of a stealth project a couple of years back. I can't remember when, but basically we saw an opportunity in some of the work that we do with projects and libraries because, you know, libraries are time poor, and as we all unfortunately know, budgets hurt. So we have libraries that come to us and they're like, we want to share our holdings, we want to move to your platform, whatever it is, but we don't want to put possibly harmful language out there because, you know, OCLC, we do have quite a few mechanisms to deal with that once it's already in WorldCat. We have a fantastic quality team that works on that, but sometimes you just don't want to take the chance of loading something and waiting for the mechanisms to kick in. So Rose and I basically added a section to some of our projects which said, do you have any sort of language in your collection that you would like us to address? And that is not just, there is, I mean, obviously in Australia here specifically, we have quite a lot of First Nations related metadata issues, I shall say. However, you go to anywhere else in the world, you're going to have medical terminology that's just really not okay in descriptions. Obviously, we have controlled subject headings that deal with some of that problem, some of those problems. But if you've got an established medical library that has some pretty off-color now, you certainly wouldn't want that sort of language in their, sorry for nerdy, 500 fields or anything like that. You don't want that going out there. It's not okay. So we work with libraries to specifically address that. And that's sort of a little, stealth project that Rose and I enacted. We try to spread that around as much as possible. And then obviously, I don't know, OCLC as an organisation do a lot of research for character sort of things. So yeah, but personally, I absolutely do that because I'm still a cataloger and I still like to do things, even if my team leaders don't necessarily know about it or might not like it. So.
Should we bleep
Yeah,
it?
it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah.
That's interesting. I've never really, because I think of reparative description just in terms of Indigenous data, and for you to talk about it in like a medical setting makes complete sense. So that's really interesting. I think, Jade, did you have a question?
I did. I'm just going to stand up because I'm hiding behind the camera. Well, we've got two panel members now that have mentioned they've done a project by stealth. That sounds a bit like asking for forgiveness instead of permission. I'm wondering if you have any words of advice as to dealing with the fallout, if there was any for those.
Look, in regard to stealth, it's talking to the right people, but also sometimes it's about the language. So I can use, when I was at City of Port Phillip, when I started back in 2003, there was cloud was an issue. So if you were to move something into cloud, you had to jump through various hoops. Our library management system at the time was based at the City of Port Phillip, and it was really out of date. It was like 15 dates out of date. But for me to get it into the Civicus Cloud, I had to use words like managed services, which is the same thing, but it means I didn't have to do policies. So, yeah, sometimes it is asking the right people, but not everyone. You know, so it is. My manager knew that we were doing it, so yeah, it was an agreed approach. But yeah, it is sometimes necessary, and it's a word that I use when I've worked in local government is glacial, you know, because it took so long to do something that can be easily done and has been done quickly. So I suppose working in library corporations where I had, but also working in organisations where I work now, and I suppose at the level I'm at, I don't have to go. I can just do it. You know, I can just say to them, this is the business case, this is the budget. Let's do it. And I suppose the time frame is dictated by probably me and others that are involved. So, but yeah, in large organisations, sometimes you need to do those things to get stuff done. Not illegally, but just getting stuff done, because otherwise you have that same issue where the person was trying just to book a simple event that another location was closed, and we were being hamstrung by the then Chief Information Officer because of all their very archaic rules that there were. So yeah, I think so everyone just do it.
Julianne, did you want to add to that?
I have nothing to add.
CEO's heart attacks here.
I mean,
I think library corporations are fine.
I think, especially in terms of things like the reparative sort of actions. Come on, guys, we just got to do it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm pointing at my team leader. I just really think there are some things that are so important that we do, and when we work in libraries, whether you're working in a vendor or, there are small actions that we can take to make massive differences, and I think adding a slide on a PowerPoint is like the tiny piece of rebellion that Rose and I undertook, and it had a really good impact, and I just think just do it. The small things, big impacts, that's kind of where we need to go.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Oh, yeah.
My question is not to any particular member of the panel, but I would just like to add on to what you've been saying. One of the big issues for our database maintenance stuff at the moment is the balls up over at National Library of Medicine. Databases being taken out of the Library of Congress and other offerings to international groups. So you know that ERIC, for instance, is no longer available for free access from the source which has hosted it since 1966. And that's a direct government cut. So the lack of appreciation of the history of things, the fact that the National Library of Medicine thought it was okay to catalogue, or rather to classify Australian Indigenous people under the broader heading of oceanic groups. Yeah, duh. It's a bit of a bumpy path at the moment. Do you have any comments that might console an old person? I feel like everything I worked for has kind of got unstitched in the last 12 months.
Oh, I'm brave. Look, so CAVAL, we are cataloguing. One of the things that I'm a reference librarian, but I look after cataloguers. It is definitely an issue, and it is, I suppose, the issue that we face is it is, for me, I look at it as like a 4-year issue, because it's been pretty much created by one individual, but I'm not going to go there. However, I think the challenge that we have, and libraries are very good at, I suppose, embracing change and looking at alternatives. So I think it's an opportunity for us to look outside, and I know others are, looking at subject headings and all that. So if anything, it will hopefully get us out of our comfort zones, because we've been, doing the same thing for so long, and maybe look at different ways of doing things. As I said, I'm a reference librarian, so when people talk about subject headings and all that, I'm just going, why don't we just take the subject headings out of the scenario? I'm only joking. I'm sure that I'll be held down. But it is true. I think, even trying to speak to my staff who have been in the industry for 30 plus years, it is about making sure that, yes, this is happening. Yes, this is the impact. What can we do to somehow have influence on this? And as I said, there are things happening within Australia and around the world. So I think it may actually mean that we come up with a better process, a better mousetrap. I don't know. But at least people are being motivated to do something and not just sit back and go, oh, okay, well, that's something else we have to, dismiss. So I think there are some really energetic, passionate people who are definitely trying to look at this in a different way and trying to improve things. Because, reparative cataloguing a few years ago is an issue, but it wasn't something that even a CAVAL was working on. But now we've actually done a number of projects with the University of Melbourne and other organisations trying to improve their collection, which is brilliant. So, and we do get more and more requests for that. How did you do it? What's the best approach? So I think, collectively, we could be dismissive and we could just say, oh, it's an American thing, but it's not. I think, Australia, I truly believe Australia and New Zealand are very progressive, especially in the library space. And I was always questioned why people would actually travel overseas to see what other countries are doing. Because I reckon we do a lot better in a lot, because we are smaller and we're more innovative in that space. So does that answer your question? Does that give you some? Because there is no magic. Yeah, there is no magic wand.
No, you're quite right. There's no single solution. I'm not seeking a single solution.
No.
It's the awareness, I guess. I think many more people this is an observation, but for a lot of people that I'm partnering or mentoring with, 30 years is just too far back. They don't want to know about stuff earlier than that. Don't want to know about taxonomies. Don't want to say, well, these are the words. But it's always, maybe folks would say, well, it was ever thus. However, the provision of subject headings from American bodies to libraries in Australia is automatically putting a barrier at the door or an extra piece of work that we then have to repair. One of the things that is happening is that there are European initiatives to, for instance, take a replica of the PubMed database and host it in Europe so that when something disastrous happens to the original, at least they know that they've got the ground level data to rebuild and to continue on with that work, which a lot of European countries benefit from as well. So we've got to be careful of geographic imperialism here, I think.
Yes. So I think the current political climate, we are at the mercy, unfortunately, of systems that we don't get much say in. And that has always been the case. In this instance, we are hamstrung by a certain individual and his impacting actions. We are also, as described, a ferocious little bunch down here. And I agree that Australia, and it's like, gosh, the stuff that New Zealand Aotearoa are doing, the Te Puna team are doing, is amazing. If you haven't had a look at the things that they are doing in terms of sort of creating spaces to kind of not make up, but sort of accommodate or move around, I really recommend you have a look at that. There are always ways. So, for instance, we have some libraries that are doing some very, I wouldn't say sneaky, but borderline sneaky things in our systems to kind of get around what's happening overseas. It is very worrying, though, to see it happening in real time, I guess. So I appreciate how concerning that is. I don't have no magic bullet or anything, but it is a bit worrying. But we are quite feisty, so continue to be feisty.
I have something leading on from where this conversation had like this. Sorry, and you have to forgive me because I arrived quite late because I had to drive up from Geelong. But I know this is probably more in the museums side of things, but you've touched on things like decolonisation and everything. How much of your work is things like is there any repatriation, for example? Because you mentioned New Zealand, and no te papa led the way with that. So, yeah. And I'd be interested, because my interest is more in libraries, and I would like to know, because that does fascinate me, whether that is on the librarian side of things as well. So, thank you.
Sorry, was that was?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That was all of you, sorry.
Okay.
Does anyone have any